The Zenith Military Academy squatted on the rim of a dying star like a metallic tumor, all angles and aggression. Its designers had clearly studied every species' idea of intimidation, and then weaponized the architecture. Krillian spires jutted skyward with the subtlety of a declaration of war, while Vorthak meditation chambers pulsed with barely contained psychic energy. The whole structure screamed competence, lethality, and the kind of institutional arrogance that only came from 3 centuries of producing the galaxy's finest killers, which made the presence of Cadet Kira Voss something of a cosmic joke. 5.7 seconds, announced Instructor Veltar, his forearms manipulating holographic displays with the practiced efficiency of someone who had delivered disappointing news to thousands of cadets. The Solani's chromatophores flickered through a spectrum that roughly translated to professional disdain. From engagement to theoretical death, that's a new Academy record. For fastest elimination? Asked Cadet Zexhai, his Krillian exoskeleton clicking with what might have been amusement. For slowest. The combat simulation chamber fell silent except for the hum of recycling atmosphere and the soft whir of medical scanners ensuring that Kira's inevitable concussion hadn't scrambled anything permanently important. She hung suspended in the neural interface web, still twitching from the feedback of her virtual demise, while 37 of her classmates watched through the observation deck with the collective enthusiasm of spectators at a public execution. Kira's opponent in the simulation, a holographic Threnody warrior, flickered and dissolved, its work complete. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. In the real galaxy, Threnody stood 8 feet tall, possessed reflexes that made hummingbirds look sluggish, and could slice through titanium with their natural bone blades. In the simulation, it had barely warmed up before reducing the human cadet to constituent atoms. Perhaps, suggested Instructor Korvash, his Vorthak vocal cords producing harmonics that made nearby equipment vibrate sympathetically. We should consider alternative career paths for our unique cadet. The diplomatic corps is always in need of translators. The observation deck erupted in what passed for laughter among 17 different species. Krillians chittered, Solani strobed through amused color patterns, and the lone hegemony representative produced a sound like grinding stone that probably indicated mirth. Kira had heard it all before. The jokes, the suggestions, the barely concealed bewilderment at how a human had even made it past the Academy's entrance requirements. What they didn't know, what their sensors couldn't measure and their computers couldn't quantify, was that Kira had been studying them just as intently as they'd been dismissing her. "I'd like to try again," she said, extracting herself from the neural web with movements that looked clumsy compared to the fluid grace of her classmates. Everything about human anatomy seemed designed to disappoint in a galaxy where evolution had produced creatures that could phase through matter, generate electromagnetic fields, or simply grow natural armor plating. Instructor Veltar's chromatophores shifted to what Kira had learned indicated polite incredulity. "Cadet Voss, the simulation parameters are calibrated for Academy standards. Perhaps a training scenario more suited to—" "The same scenario," Kira interrupted, ignoring the fresh wave of chittering from the observation deck. "Same opponent, same parameters." She caught sight of Cadet Threxnel, a hegemony war breed whose idea of morning exercises involved deadlifting small vehicles. His compound eyes tracked her movements with the interest of a predator, watching prey that had mysteriously failed to flee. Next to him, Cadet Lissara's telepathic field rippled with what the Vorthak probably thought was subtle amusement, but felt to Kira like someone broadcasting smugness directly into her brainstem. Very well, Veltar decided, apparently concluding that watching the human fail twice might provide valuable pedagogical insights. Reset the simulation. Same parameters. Kira settled back into the neural interface, feeling the familiar tingle as the Academy's quantum processors mapped her nervous system and prepared to translate her thoughts into digital violence. Around her, 37 pairs of eyes, and various other optical arrangements, waited to witness her second humiliation in as many minutes. The simulation loaded. Virtual reality crystallized into a standard combat arena. Neutral gray surfaces, adequate lighting, no environmental hazards that might confuse the issue. The Threnody warrior materialized across from her, 8 feet of predatory evolution that had been refined by millions of years of killing things that moved too slowly. Veltar's voice echoed through the simulation space. Begin. The Threnody moved like lightning wrapped in violence. Bone blades extended from its forearms with snicks that sounded like death sentences being signed. It covered half the distance between them in the time it took Kira's human nervous system to process the word, begin. And then Kira did something that made the Academy's computers pause for 17 nanoseconds, an eternity in digital time, as they tried to categorize her response. She didn't fight the Threnody. She didn't try to match its speed, counter its aggression, or demonstrate any of the combat techniques that filled the Academy's vast databases. Instead, she simply watched. Her eyes tracked the warrior's movement patterns while her body remained perfectly still, as if she were memorizing a dance rather than facing imminent dismemberment. The Threnody's blade opened her throat in 5.4 seconds. Virtual blood painted the gray walls. Simulation ended. But this time, the observation deck remained silent. "Curious," murmured Instructor Korvash, his psychic field probing at the simulation data with the delicacy of a surgeon. The human exhibited no stress response, no flight reaction, no defensive measures whatsoever. Veltar's chromatophores flickered through patterns that indicated confusion. Perhaps a malfunction in the neural interface? "Run a diagnostic," ordered Commander Thissicol from her position at the back of the observation deck. The Krillian's authority filled the room like gravity, inevitable and inescapable. 3 centuries of Academy records showed that when the commander spoke, cadets listened or found themselves explaining their career choices to their disappointment parents. The diagnostic completed in moments, all systems nominal, neural interface perfect. The human had simply chosen not to defend herself. "Cadet Voss," the commander's voice carried the weight of institutional disapproval. "Explain your tactical reasoning." Kira stood among the scattered neural interface cables, looking smaller and more fragile than ever surrounded by the Academy's intimidating technology. When she spoke, her voice carried none of the bravado that might have been expected from someone who had just committed elaborate suicide. "I was gathering data." The observation deck erupted in fresh laughter, but this time it sounded forced, uncomfortable. "Data on dying?" Zexhai's exoskeleton clicked in what might have been mockery, or might have been something else entirely. "Data on how it hunts?" Kira replied, and something in her tone made the laughter die. Commander Thisicol's compound eyes focused on the human cadet, with the intensity of targeting sensors acquiring a lock. "Explain." The Threnody commits to a killing strike within 2.3 seconds of engagement. Dominant blade arm leads by 4 degrees. Footwork follows a pattern designed for maximum leverage against opponents who try to evade laterally. It's been optimized for killing things that run. The silence in the observation deck had developed a quality that made several cadets unconsciously check their environmental suit's integrity. "You observed these patterns while being killed?" Veltar's chromatophores had shifted to colors that didn't appear in any translation manual. "The first time was to confirm that I couldn't match its speed," Kira said. The second time was to learn how it thinks. She paused, and for just a moment, something flickered behind her unremarkable human eyes that made Cadet Threxnell's war-bred instincts scream warnings he couldn't quite interpret. Would you like to see what I learned? The maw had earned its reputation by devouring the overconfident. This particular moon orbited a gas giant that screamed electromagnetic tantrums across 3 star systems, creating an environment where modern technology functioned about as reliably as Academy cafeteria food. No orbital support, no emergency extraction, no convenient force fields to prevent cadets from learning permanent lessons about mortality. Perfect for weeding out those who confused theoretical knowledge with survival instinct. Kira crouched behind a crystalline outcropping, watching Zexhai attempt to commune with his malfunctioning equipment. The Krillion's exoskeleton, normally a masterpiece of biological engineering, had developed an alarming tendency to seize at crucial joints. Atmospheric interference played havoc with his targeting systems, and his ceremonial combat claws kept retracting at inappropriate moments. This environment violates 17 safety protocols, he muttered, his mandibles clicking with frustrated precision. The electromagnetic cascade should have been factored into mission parameters. Complaining to management? Kira asked, adjusting her grip on what could charitably be called weapons, if one possessed a generous definition of the term. Human standard issue on the maw consisted of items that wouldn't explode when exposed to exotic radiation. A titanium knife, a coil of synthrope, and emergency rations that doubled as improvised explosives if prepared incorrectly. I am documenting operational inadequacies for post-mission analysis, Zexhai replied, with the wounded dignity of someone whose species had turned bureaucratic procedure into an art form. 3 hours into their survival exercise, they had encountered exactly nothing that wanted to kill them, which on the maw represented a statistical impossibility that worried Kira considerably. The moon's ecosystem thrived on consuming unwary visitors. Somewhere in this crystalline wasteland, something was hunting them with the patience of a creature that had learned not to hurry toward its meals. Movement, Zexhai announced, his sensor array finally cooperating long enough to provide useful data. Bearing 27 Mark 15. Large, approaching fast. The Shadow Maw emerged from a crevice that should have been too small to contain anything larger than Kira's thumb. Physics on the maw operated under local regulations that made conservation of mass more of a guideline than a law. 8 legs moved with hydraulic precision across the crystalline terrain, each footfall calculated to produce maximum psychological impact. Its hide shifted between transparency and opacity like liquid obsidian, making range estimation an exercise in optimistic guesswork. Academy records listed 14 previous encounters with Shadow Maws. Casualty rate, 100%. Protocol suggests immediate tactical withdrawal, Zexhai announced, his voice carrying the mechanical calm of someone reciting established procedure, while certain death approached at approximately 40 kilometers per hour. The creature's hunting cry echoed across the crystalline landscape, a sound like mathematics being tortured into surrendering their fundamental constants. Kira felt her inner ear attempt to process auditory frequencies that human evolution had never encountered, producing a sensation roughly equivalent to nausea with philosophical implications. Withdrawal. To where? She asked, noting that the Shadow Maw's approach had effectively blocked their retreat route, while simultaneously cutting off access to 3 separate escape vectors. The creature hunted with the tactical sophistication of something that had been perfecting its technique for considerably longer than the Academy had been training cadets. Zexhai's exoskeleton finally committed to full combat configuration, transforming him into a mobile weapons platform that could theoretically punch through light armor. His targeting systems achieved lock on the approaching Shadow Maw and immediately began calculating optimal engagement strategies based on conventional warfare doctrine. which assumed that conventional warfare doctrine applied to creatures that treated physics as a set of interesting suggestions. The Shadow Maw phase shifted through Zexhai's first volley, demonstrating that local space-time responded to its presence like a devoted pet. Its counterattack involved temporarily relocating the Krillian's left leg to a dimension where pain existed as a fundamental force rather than a mere sensation. Zexhai's scream contained harmonics that made nearby crystals resonate sympathetically. Fascinating adaptation, Kira observed, circling wide while the creature focused its attention on dismantling her partner with the methodical enthusiasm of a craftsman proud of his work. It doesn't just hunt prey. It studies their psychology first. The Shadow Maw's hunting pattern revealed careful analysis of Krillian combat doctrine. It attacked joints that Zexhai's training had taught him to protect, exploited reflexes that his species considered instinctive advantages, and demonstrated a thorough understanding of how Krillian pain responses could be weaponized against their bearer. Assistance would be appreciated, Zexhai managed between attempts to prevent his internal organs from achieving independent mobility. Kira approached the engaged combatants with the casual stride of someone out for an evening stroll. Her movement pattern avoided the obvious attack vectors while remaining within striking distance, a contradiction that should have been impossible, but somehow wasn't. The Shadow Maw noticed her approach and gracefully extracted itself from Zexhai's increasingly theoretical anatomy. It studied the approaching human with the focused attention of a predator encountering something outside its experience database. Kira stopped just outside the creature's effective range and did something that violated every survival instinct that evolution had spent millions of years refining. She sat down. Not a combat crouch, not a defensive position. She simply folded her legs beneath her and settled onto the crystalline ground, as if she had all the time in the galaxy to contemplate her surroundings. The Shadow Maw's stalking behavior shifted into patterns that registered as confusion on Kira's peripheral vision. The creature had apparently never encountered prey that responded to imminent death by taking a break. Cadet Voss, Zexhai croaked from his position among the scattered remnants of his combat effectiveness. This may not be the optimal moment for meditation techniques. It's trying to decide what I am, Kira replied conversationally. Predator, prey, or something it doesn't have a category for. The Shadow Maw began circling, each movement designed to trigger flight responses that Kira steadfastly refused to provide. Its hunting cry shifted frequencies, probing for psychological vulnerabilities that apparently didn't exist in human behavioral patterns. Most prey runs when stalked, Kira continued, her voice carrying the calm observation of someone discussing weather patterns. Some fight when cornered. But humans do something that confuses predators. She stood with fluid motion that seemed to contain no urgency despite the 8-legged death machine currently evaluating her protein content. We hunt back. The Shadow Maw struck with the speed of collapsing probability, its phase-shifting abilities allowing it to approach from directions that technically didn't exist. Its attack pattern demonstrated mastery of 4-dimensional geometry and the kind of confidence that came from never having encountered effective resistance. Kira stepped sideways into a space that the creature's senses insisted was occupied by solid matter, wrapped her synthrop around what might generously be called a neck, and used the Shadow Maw's own momentum to introduce its cranial region to the crystalline ground at velocities approaching the educational. The impact produced a sound like reality checking its math and finding computational errors. 3 seconds, beginning to end. The Shadow Maw twitched once and achieved permanent motionlessness. Zexhai stared at the scene with compound eyes that had been designed to process rapid battlefield changes, but seemed to be experiencing buffer overflow while attempting to catalog what had just occurred. How? He managed, his vocal apparatus struggling with concepts that didn't fit into established tactical frameworks. Kira extracted her synthrope from the creature's remains and coiled it with practiced efficiency. It expected me to think like prey. But humans learned to hunt things that were faster, stronger, and better armed than we were. She glanced at the Shadow Maw's corpse with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a particularly interesting puzzle. We didn't evolve to be the strongest predator. We evolved to be the one that never stops coming. The Academy's war games transformed the facility's lower levels into a maze of temporary battlefields where cadets could demonstrate their species' particular talents for creative violence. Holographic barriers created kill zones, capture points, and ambush opportunities while quantum sensors tracked every pulse, projectile, and psychic emanation. What they couldn't track was reputation. Third hunting parties, gone silent, reported Cadet Vixera, her Solani chromatophores cycling through patterns that indicated professional concern, mixed with species-specific paranoia. Last telemetry showed them pursuing a single target through Sector 7. Cadet Murak's crystalline exoskeleton chimed with harmonic frequencies that roughly translated to skeptical amusement. One opponent eliminated a full hegemony strike team. The humans have curious ideas about battlefield mathematics. Their temporary command post buzzed with the controlled chaos of a dozen species attempting to coordinate tactics, despite fundamental disagreements about the nature of reality. Vorthok cadets insisted that victory required psychic domination, while their Krillian counterparts favored direct application of overwhelming firepower. The Solani contribution to strategy sessions typically involved elaborate plans that assumed everyone else would cooperate with their phase-shifting requirements. Fourth hunting parties requesting immediate extraction, announced another voice from the communications array. Medical emergency, multiple casualties. Vixara's optical organs focused with the intensity of targeting lasers. Define casualties. Severe psychological trauma, 3 cadets in cataleptic shock, 1 requiring emergency telepathic intervention to prevent permanent cognitive fragmentation. The command post fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of combat echoing through the Academy's superstructure. Psychological warfare was nothing new to cadets who regularly faced opponents capable of manipulating matter at the molecular level or projecting nightmares directly into enemy consciousness. But cataleptic shock suggested something beyond standard battlefield stress. What exactly did they encounter? Murak's harmonic inquiry contained undertones that indicated his species' equivalent of unease. The response came wrapped in encryption protocols typically reserved for classified military intelligence. Target designation: Human Voss Kira. Recommend immediate reclassification from trainee to threat assessment required. Across the Academy's combat zones, similar conversations unfolded in 17 different languages as hunting parties reported encounters that defied conventional tactical analysis. The human cadet wasn't simply winning engagements, she was fundamentally altering how her opponents thought about combat. Cadet Threxnell discovered this during what should have been a straightforward ambush in the hydroponics bay. His hegemony war conditioning had prepared him for opponents who fought with honor, fury, or desperate cunning. He had not been prepared for someone who treated combat like an anthropological research project. Impressive musculature development. Kira's voice drifted from somewhere among the nutrient tanks, carrying the conversational tone of someone making casual observations. Hegemony selective breeding, really, optimized for explosive power output. But that creates predictable metabolic limitations. Threxnell's compound eyes swept the facility, searching for heat signatures that his enhanced senses insisted should be clearly visible. Instead, he found only the maddening certainty that something was studying him with the clinical interest of a researcher documenting specimen behavior. "Show yourself," he demanded, his vocal cords producing harmonics designed to intimidate opponents into submission. The sound echoed off metallic surfaces, without generating any response, except the soft whisper of recycling atmosphere. "Fascinating," the voice continued, now originating from a completely different location. "Your threat displays are calibrated for species that respond to dominance hierarchies. But humans established their position in the food chain by ignoring hierarchies entirely." Threxnell spun toward the new sound signature, his combat reflexes triggering a barrage that reduced 3 hydroponic tanks to component molecules. Steam and nutrient solution filled the air with chemical fog that should have revealed any hidden opponents. Instead, he heard soft laughter. "The Academy teaches engagement doctrine based on evolutionary advantages," Kira observed from yet another impossible location. "But humans developed our tactics by hunting creatures that should have been impossible for us to kill." Something touched the back of Threxnell's neck with the gentleness of a whisper. He spun again, his war-bred instincts screaming warnings about proximity threats, but found nothing except empty air and the growing certainty that he was no longer the predator in this scenario. "We learned patience from creatures that could outrun us," the voice continued, now seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. "We learned persistence from creatures that could outlast us, and we learned psychological warfare from creatures that could think faster than us." Threxnell's compound eyes registered movement that his conscious mind refused to acknowledge. Peripheral shadows that shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. Thermal patterns that suggested presence without confirming location. But the most important thing we learned, Kira's voice had acquired an quality that made Threxnell's instincts scream about apex predators, was how to make our prey stop wanting to fight. The hydroponics bay fell silent except for the drip of damaged nutrient systems and the ragged sound of Threxnell's breathing as his war conditioning encountered something it had no protocols for addressing. When Academy security found him 20 minutes later, the Hegemony Cadet was sitting motionless among the wreckage, staring at nothing with the expression of someone who had just realized that everything he understood about combat was wrong. Similar scenes played out across 12 sectors as hunting parties encountered the human and discovered that their species' military advantages meant nothing against an opponent who refused to engage on familiar terms. The Academy's quantum sensors recorded the tactical data while completely failing to capture what was actually happening. "She's not fighting them," observed Instructor Korvash during the post-engagement analysis. His Vorthak psychic field rippled with patterns that indicated professional fascination mixed with species-appropriate concern. "She's teaching them something." Commander Thyssicol studied the tactical displays with the focused attention of someone whose 3 centuries of military experience had just encountered a completely new category of warfare. What kind of lessons require psychological trauma as a teaching aid? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the Academy's archives, quantum storage systems that hadn't been accessed in decades suddenly activated as something triggered automated research protocols. Database queries cascaded through information networks, seeking patterns that matched current tactical observations. What they found changed everything. General Kethrisvol materialized in the Academy's secure briefing chamber like a particularly ominous weather pattern achieving consciousness. Her Nexari form shifted between dimensional phases with the casual authority of someone who had spent 2 centuries making problems disappear across 17 star systems. When the Galactic military's chief xenopsychology analyst requested emergency consultations, Academy commanders listened with the attentiveness of people suddenly aware that their careers hung in balance. "Seal the chamber," she commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality seem slightly less stable in her immediate vicinity. Classification Level Omega. Authorization, Apex Predator Protocol. Commander Thyssicol's exoskeleton locked into formal attention postures, while her compound eyes processed information that her brain insisted couldn't be accurate. General, with respect, we're discussing a single cadet's performance irregularities. Are we? Kethrisivol gestured toward the holographic displays showing tactical data from the war games. Your Academy's sensors recorded 17 separate encounters where cadets from 9 different species experienced complete psychological collapse after engaging a lone human opponent, not defeats, psychological destruction. The briefing chamber's atmospheric processors struggled to maintain optimal environmental conditions as various species' stress pheromones created chemical cocktails that triggered emergency filtration protocols. Instructor Veltar's chromatophores flickered through patterns that didn't exist in standard translation matrices. General, Korvash interjected, his psychic field radiating carefully controlled confusion. Human military capabilities are well documented. Limited physical advantages, moderate technological development, unremarkable strategic thinking. They barely qualified for Academy admission. Kethrisivol's dimensional form stabilized into something resembling amusement. Your databases contain edited information, sanitized for public consumption. She activated security protocols that transformed the briefing chamber into a temporal isolation field. What I'm about to show you is classified at levels that most civilizations don't acknowledge exist. Holographic displays materialized, showing star maps that predated the current galactic civilization by several millennia. Ancient trade routes, forgotten colonies, and species designations that appeared in no current xenobiological references. 12,000 years ago, the hegemony encountered humans during their expansion into what you now call the outer spiral. Initial contact protocols suggested a primitive species, suitable for integration or exploitation. She paused, allowing the implications to settle. The hegemony committed 4 full battle fleets to human subjugation. And Thyssicol's vocal apparatus produced questioning harmonics. They disappeared. The holographic display shifted to show after-action reports, written in archaic hegemony script, their content scrolling past too quickly for real-time translation, but slow enough to catch fragments. Psychological warfare, impossible tactical adaptations, entire crews found in catatonic states. The humans hadn't developed faster than light travel. They possessed no energy weapons, no force fields, no genetic enhancement technologies. By every reasonable metric, they should have been conquered in weeks. Instructor Veltar's chromatophores had shifted to colors that indicated species-specific distress. What happened to the battle fleets? They came home, Kethrisivol replied. Eventually. The crews required extensive psychological rehabilitation. Many never recovered. The official reports were classified and buried so deeply that accessing them now required authorization from species that no longer exist. She gestured toward additional displays showing similar encounters across galactic history. The Vorthak consciousness, the Solani phase collective, the crystalline hierarchies. Every major civilization had eventually made contact with humans and reached the same conclusion. Humans were quarantined on their homeworld and classified as a Class Omega psychological hazard. Contact was forbidden, except through heavily filtered diplomatic channels designed to prevent direct military engagement. Commander Thyssicol's compound eyes focused on the streaming data with growing comprehension and horror. The Academy's admission protocols were bypassed by a bureaucratic error that assumed human military capabilities matched their official classification as developing species. Kethrisvol's form shifted through dimensional phases that conveyed cosmic irony. No one bothered to check the classified addendums. The briefing chamber fell silent except for the hum of temporal isolation fields and the sound of carefully maintained atmospheric systems. In that silence, the war games continued in the Academy's lower levels, where Cadet Kira Voss had just encountered her final hunting party. "Status report from Sector 12, announced a communication drone, its artificial voice cutting through the stunned quiet. "All remaining hunter-killer teams have surrendered. Cadet Voss is requesting permission to return to barracks." General Kethrisvol's amusement became visible as ripples in local space-time. "Your cadet hasn't been learning Academy tactics. She's been remembering species memories that predate your civilization." Through the Academy's internal sensors, they watched Kira emerge from the combat zones with the unhurried stride of someone who had just completed routine training exercises. Her equipment remained largely unused, her vital signs indicated mild exertion, and her expression suggested the satisfaction of someone who had spent the day solving interesting puzzles. Behind her, scattered across 12 sectors, 37 cadets from 17 species sat in various states of psychological reassessment. Not injured, enlightened. Each had encountered something that their evolutionary programming insisted was impossible. A predator that hunted by making prey forget why they wanted to survive. The nickname, Commander Thisical realized with dawning horror. Death Whisper, Kethrisvol confirmed, not because she moves silently, but because of the sound prey makes when they realize they've stopped being the hunter. In the Academy's central database, classification protocols activated that hadn't been accessed in millennia. Cadet Kira Voss's status shifted from trainee to something that required authorization codes most civilizations had forgotten existed. The galaxy's newest military academy had just rediscovered why some species were considered too dangerous to train. They had been teaching a human to be a better soldier, when all along, they should have been learning why humans had never needed lessons.